The boardroom froze the moment the janitor spoke. Fluent, flawless Japanese cutting through a wall of silence. Every executive turned. Every camera stopped. The woman they called the Ice Queen CEO blinked, stunned, as the man holding a mop quietly exposed the truth that could save her empire. No one had understood Hanasato until that single dad broke the silence. Stay with us, because what happened after that moment will change how you think about language, love, and second chances forever. And if stories like this remind you that kindness can rewrite destinies, don't forget to tap like. Share it with someone who needs hope today, and let us know what's the quietest act of courage you've ever seen. The ballroom of the Manhattan Tech Expo gleamed beneath the noon skylights. Chrome, glass, and tension. Cameras lined every balcony. Reporters whispered like vultures in tailored suits, waiting for one woman to stumble. At the center of it all stood Hana Sato, the elusive billionaire CEO of Sato Dynamics. Her pearl gray suit was flawless, her posture carved from restraint, her silence louder than the questions being hurled at her. Ms. Sato, did you authorize the cuts to the Safety Reserve Fund? Is it true you laid off 400 workers while raising executive bonuses? The questions struck like stones. Hana didn't flinch. No comment, she said, her voice calm, almost melodic. To the cameras, it sounded cold. To anyone who looked closer, it was the only thing keeping her from breaking. The truth was buried under layers of legal constraint, an internal investigation, non-disclosure agreements, and a board waiting for her to trip. Across the room, a man in a maintenance uniform adjusted a camera light that had started to flicker. Gabriel Cole, 35, was used to being invisible. Once an aircraft technician, now a janitor for events like this, he'd learned to fix without being seen. His 8-year-old daughter Mia stood beside him, clutching a lunchbox shaped like a cat. Since her mother's death 2 years earlier, Mia rarely spoke above a whisper. Today was take your kid to work day by necessity, not choice. Childcare fell through, and Gabriel couldn't risk losing another shift. He had promised her they'd stay in the back, quiet as shadows. But fate didn't care about promises. An hour later, as Hana was escorted to a backstage elevator for a private investor meeting, the unexpected happened. A brief power flicker froze the digital screens, and the elevator jolted to a halt between floors. Inside were only 3 people: Hana, her security aide, and a small girl with wide brown eyes gripping a cat-shaped lunchbox. The aide hit the emergency button to no response, panic rising in the confined air. The girl's breathing quickened, then turned into sharp, ragged sobs. "Mia?" Gabriel's voice came faintly from the intercom above. "It's okay, honey. Daddy's right here." But Mia's small hands were trembling too badly to reply. Then Hana did something no one had ever seen her do. She knelt. Her immaculate suit brushed the floor as she reached for the child's hands. Her voice softened to a hush, carrying a rhythm that didn't belong to English. "Neko tu asa no amu," she sang quietly, a Japanese lullaby older than any of the skyscrapers above them. The melody floated through the stale air, round and gentle, like the sound of porcelain tapping gold. The girl's sobs slowed. Through the speaker grill, Gabriel's reply came, halting but clear. "Daijobu, chisana musume." You're safe. His pronunciation was almost perfect, touched with tenderness. Hana looked up, startled, not because he spoke her language, but because he said it with the cadence of someone who understood its heart. Minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. Reporters waiting for Hana's exit gasped when the doors revealed her kneeling beside a child, whispering something in Japanese. Flashbulbs erupted. In that split second, the city that had labeled her ruthless caught a glimpse of something different. Compassion disguised as silence. Outside the cordon, Gabriel scooped Mia into his arms, nodding an apology to the startled CEO. "Thank you," he said quietly. She studied him, a man in a faded uniform, sleeves rolled to his forearms, eyes dark with exhaustion, but kind. "You speak Japanese," she said softly. "My wife taught me," he answered, his voice steady, though his throat ached on the word wife. For a heartbeat, the two simply looked at each other. The billionaire and the janitor. Two strangers linked by a child's fear and a lullaby in a language not their own. As the crowd swarmed again, Hana straightened, face composed. Cameras zoomed in on the small streak of dust on her knee, on the faint smile she tried to hide. Reporters murmured, "She knelt? For a child?" Her PR assistant whispered, "We should leave before this goes viral." Hana ignored her. For once, she didn't mind the rumors. Later that night, social media flooded with that single photograph. The untouchable CEO kneeling beside a crying girl. The caption read, "Who is she when the cameras stop?" But the more intriguing question was whispered elsewhere. Among the technicians, the staff, the reporters who caught a glimpse of the man holding the child. Who was the janitor who spoke to her in perfect Japanese? And as Manhattan hummed beneath its skyline, neither Hana Sato nor Gabriel Cole knew that this moment, the silence between their two languages, had already begun to unravel both their lives in ways no one could predict. The next morning, headlines screamed across Manhattan, "Ice Queen CEO melts for a child." The photo of Hana kneeling beside Mia flooded every newsfeed. PR analysts called it a humanizing accident. Critics called it a stunt. Hana said nothing. Silence, once her weapon, had become her shield. Yet in the quiet hours before dawn, she couldn't shake the sound of the man's voice through the elevator intercom. The way he'd said "Daijobu" with a tenderness that belonged to another life. For Gabriel, the story had already moved on. The night shift at the expo ended near 3 a.m. And by sunrise, he was back at his garage in Queens, a converted shipping bay lined with mismatched tools and coffee-stained blueprints. His wife's old scarf hung above the workbench, patterned with cranes and tiny brushstrokes of gold. He touched it each morning before opening the rolling door. Keiko had been a translator, half Japanese, half Seattle-raised, who believed every word carried a color. "English is structure," she used to say, "but Japanese is emotion." When she died in the car crash that left Mia silent, Gabriel spent months drowning in both languages, unable to speak either. The first time he tried to comfort his daughter, she flinched from English, so he learned her mother's tongue. Night after night, he traced hiragana from Keiko's old notebooks, whispering lullabies to a child who wouldn't answer. By the end of that winter, Mia began to hum along. Words returned slowly. Small, delicate things like mama and Amy, rain. Hana's story unfolded in quieter shadows. Her father, a machinist from Yokohama, had emigrated to New York in the 80s with nothing but a set of precision tools. Her mother, a literature teacher, filled their apartment with calligraphy and haiku. They taught her kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, not to hide the cracks, but to honor them. When her father was falsely accused of falsifying safety records for a contractor, Hana was 17. Overnight, he lost his job, his name, and his health. Her mother, frail from illness, died soon after. Hana had learned one truth that would harden her forever. Speaking too early could destroy everything. She vowed never to defend herself until she had proof that couldn't be twisted. Now, years later, that vow felt like a curse. Her company was under attack by hedge fund vultures and sensational media, accusing her of cutting the safety reserve fund, a claim she couldn't yet refute without breaching non-disclosure agreements tied to a pending federal audit. To speak was to risk losing everything her father's memory had built. To stay silent was to be hated. At the expo, life resumed in the aftermath of the viral photo. Reporters camped outside. Employees whispered. Investors speculated. Only one person moved as if none of it mattered. Gabriel, now reassigned to the maintenance wing after his quick fix during the power flicker. He didn't seek credit for saving the expo's cooling system, but Hana noticed. Reviewing security footage to prepare for an investor meeting, She caught a brief clip. A man kneeling beside a vent, using a piece of wire and a bottle cap to reroute condensation from a failing coolant valve. Improvised. Flawless. "Who is that?" she asked her assistant. "Some contractor, I think. Maintenance temp from Queens." Hannah stared at the screen. The man worked with the same precision her father once had, the same quiet competence. Later that afternoon, their paths crossed again near the service corridor. Gabriel was wiping coolant from his hands. Mia perched on a toolbox, sketching on napkins. The girl glanced up shyly, holding out her drawing. A cat sitting beneath a paper umbrella, golden rain dripping around it. Hannah recognized the kanji beneath, kintsugi. "You know that word?" she asked softly. Gabriel smiled. "Keiko taught me. It means something's more beautiful after it's broken, right?" Hannah nodded. "If repaired with care." For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Grief recognizing itself in another form. Hannah noticed the napkin covered in tiny poems written in both English and Japanese. "You write these?" "Just bedtime haiku for Mia. Helps her sleep." His voice carried both humility and ache. Hannah bent closer, reading one. "Wires hum like rain. Silence mends what words cannot. Gold hides in the cracks." Her chest tightened. It could have been written by her mother. That evening, as the city lights blurred through her penthouse windows, Hannah placed her mother's old music box on the desk. The same lullaby she had hummed in the elevator played softly, Neko to asa no ame. She thought of the mechanic who spoke her childhood language, of the child who drew golden rain. Outside, the media still called her ruthless, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone inside the noise. Somewhere in Queens, a single father whispered the same lullaby to his daughter, unaware that the woman he'd met by accident carried a secret that would soon rewrite both their lives. The conference room on the 48th floor gleamed with glass and steel, every reflection cutting like a blade. It was the quarterly board meeting of Sato Dynamics, streamed live to Tokyo, Osaka, and London. Dozens of investors filled the room, some in person, others on massive holographic screens. Hannah stood at the head of the table, spine straight, her calm face hiding the war within. A translator from the Tokyo office sat beside her, headset glinting, ready to bridge the two languages that ruled her empire. Every word mattered. A single mistranslation could destroy her. Gabriel was supposed to be invisible that morning. Maintenance shift, post-lunch cleanup. He kept to the shadows, polishing the metal trims at the back of the boardroom. Mia sat quietly in a corner with crayons, sketching golden lines that looked like cracks stitched with sunlight. The meeting began, and within minutes, Hannah felt the ground tilt beneath her. A Japanese investor, stern and precise, spoke through his translator about the Safety Reserve Fund. His tone was respectful but firm. "Your report appears to indicate a reallocation of the emergency maintenance budget into executive bonuses. Can you confirm this was authorized by your office?" The English translation landed like a bomb. Murmurs rippled across the room. Hannah's throat tightened. She had never done that. Her internal documents listed the fund under Kinyu Anzen Yobihi, a reserved emergency buffer, but the translation on screen read Bobi Kagan, budget reduction. It was a technical slip that reversed the meaning entirely. Hannah opened her mouth to correct it, but legal protocol froze her. Every word she spoke could violate disclosure terms. Her silence, again, was misunderstood as guilt. Cameras blinked red. Somewhere in the corner, Gabriel looked up from the reflection he was wiping. The Japanese words were wrong. He recognized them instantly. Keiko used to translate financial manuals during her freelance days. He had helped her proofread tables like this, learning the difference between reserve and reduction. The translator had made a dangerous mistake. Or worse, it was intentional. He hesitated. A janitor had no right to speak in a board meeting, especially one broadcast to international investors. But when he saw Hannah's shoulders stiffen, the same helpless posture Keiko had once worn in a hospital bed, unable to speak for herself, Something in him snapped. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady but low. Dozens of heads turned. "If I may, that translation isn't accurate." The room froze. The head translator blinked, confused. Hana's assistant hissed, "Who is this man?" But Gabriel stepped forward, ignoring the stares. "The term Kinyu Anzen Yobihi means a ring-fenced safety reserve, not a reduction. The document says those funds were locked for emergencies, not cut." The Japanese investor frowned, then checked the document on his tablet. He switched to Japanese, addressing Gabriel directly. "You speak our language?" Gabriel bowed slightly. "My late wife was Japanese. I learned to keep her words alive." For the first time in months, Hana felt her breath return. She turned toward the investor and spoke in Japanese herself, clear, calm, precise. "Yes, the reserve was locked to prevent misuse during the transition period. No one touched it." The man nodded slowly. "That changes everything." He muttered something to his aide, who began updating figures in real time. The red indicators on the investor dashboards turned green. The board murmured in confusion. The reporter live streaming the event stammered. The same phrase that had branded Hana a villain was now revealed as proof of her prudence. "Then the reports accusing you were mistranslated," Hana finished quietly. "Or manipulated." Cameras zoomed in on her face as she said it. Not angry, not triumphant, simply certain. Gabriel caught her gaze and she gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Just one heartbeat, but enough. He had given her a voice when she couldn't use her own. When the meeting ended, the board members left murmuring about audits and new checks. The translator who had erred avoided her eyes. Hana didn't reprimand him. She didn't need to. Truth had already begun its slow climb back to the surface. Outside the conference room, Gabriel packed his rags and tools, ready to leave before security remembered he wasn't supposed to be there. "Mr. Cole," Hana's voice stopped him at the door. She was holding one of Mia's drawings, a bowl mended with gold, the word kintsugi written beneath in uneven hiragana. "Your daughter drew this?" "Yes, ma'am." "She sees beauty in the broken," Hana said softly. "You both do." That evening, the clip of the janitor correcting the translation went viral. Commentators called him the silent interpreter. But to Hana, he was something far simpler, a reminder that not every voice needed a title to carry truth. Yet even as the headlines turned in her favor, a question lingered at the back of her mind. How had that mistranslation made it into an official report in the first place? And why did it feel deliberate? The silence, once comforting, was about to become dangerous again. The storm after the board meeting didn't come from outside. It brewed in hushed corridors and encrypted emails. Hana's vindication should have ended the rumors, but the silence that followed was sharper than applause. The mistranslation hadn't been an accident. She could feel it. Somewhere in the folds of her company, someone had been twisting the language to wound her. Still, she said nothing. The audit was ongoing, and one wrong word could still unravel everything. She returned to her office late that night, staring out over Manhattan's cityscape as if the truth might glow somewhere among the lights. Downstairs, Gabriel clocked out later than usual. The conference hall was empty, echoes of power washed away with mop water. He guided Mia through the quiet hallway, her small hand swinging a lunchbox that still smelled faintly of crayons. When they passed the service bay, a maintenance worker handed him a thick envelope. "Found this under the HVAC panel," the man said. "Looks like paperwork, Japanese writing. Could be yours." Gabriel frowned. He wasn't expecting mail, but the label, handwritten in neat kanji, read, "To Sato Haru Foundation, Child Program, Confidential." He hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. Inside were printed receipts, donation transfers, and handwritten notes in both English and Japanese. His breath caught when he saw one entry, "Therapeutic Music Program, Patient, Mia Cole." It listed every session Mia had attended, paid for by an anonymous donor under the alias Sato Haru. He flipped the page. Each transaction was signed with a tiny gold stamp, an emblem of a bowl mended with cracks. Kintsugi. He didn't sleep that night. The pieces fit too perfectly. The lullaby, the haiku, the woman who'd looked at his daughter as if she recognized her pain. The next morning, he walked into Hana's office before the staff arrived. She was standing by the window, barefoot, her suit jacket draped over a chair, eyes shadowed from another sleepless night. "I think this belongs to you," Gabriel said, placing the envelope on her desk. For the first time since they'd met, Hana looked startled. She opened the envelope slowly, scanning the receipts. "You found this where?" "Maintenance duct," he said. "I didn't mean to pry, but you've been funding my daughter's therapy." Her fingers stilled on the paper. "I only wanted to help quietly," she said. "Mia reminded me of someone I used to be, someone who needed to believe healing was possible." He watched her face soften in a way the world had never seen. "You could have told me." "And take away your dignity?" she said gently. "No, Mr. Cole. Real kindness never puts a price tag on gratitude." She closed the folder and placed it back on the table. "But there's something else here. Something bigger." She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small, brittle sheet of paper. It was a haiku her mother had written decades ago, framed in faint gold ink. "My mother's last note," Hana explained. "She hid numbers in the poem, coordinates to a storage archive in Yokohama. That's where my father's original ledgers are kept. If I can retrieve them, I can prove he was framed, and that the same firm behind his case is the one manipulating our reports now." Gabriel leaned closer, reading the poem aloud. "In silence we mend. Gold binds what truth could not hold. Rain sings over scars. Beneath each line, faintly, were numeric codes. You've been sitting on this for years?" "Waiting for the right witness," Hana said. "Someone who wouldn't twist my words again." He exhaled. "Then let me be that witness." Read it aloud, Hana. "In both languages. Let people hear what silence sounds like when it finally breaks." Her eyes met his. "You think anyone will believe poetry over spreadsheets?" "They'll believe you if it's real," he said softly. "And if Mia's there, she listens to the things most people miss." 2 nights later, Hana stepped onto the same stage where she'd once been ridiculed. This time, she carried no graphs or contracts, just her mother's haiku and a folder of evidence Gabriel had helped decode. Cameras blinked. She began in Japanese, her voice steady. "In silence we mend." Then, switching to English, she translated line by line, showing how the hidden codes matched transaction records from 20 years earlier. Records exposing the firm that had manipulated her father's files and now targeted her company. The audience fell into absolute stillness. Behind the stage curtain, Gabriel held Mia's hand. When the final slide appeared, a chain of forged translations linking back to the same consultancy that had accidentally misinterpreted her reports, the crowd erupted. The quiet woman they had once mocked had turned language itself into justice. As Hana bowed under the flood of camera flashes, a single tear traced her cheek. Gabriel saw not a CEO, but a daughter finally speaking for her father. The scandal burned through Wall Street like wildfire. Within 48 hours of Hana's public revelation, the Department of Commerce launched a full-scale investigation into the consulting group that had doctored translations and manipulated safety audits for years. Sato Dynamics' stock, once plummeting, began to rise. Investors who had called her reckless now praised her integrity. But Hana didn't stay for the applause. When the cameras finally dimmed, she walked out into the cold Manhattan air and let the silence wash over her. For the first time in a decade, it didn't feel like isolation. It felt like peace. Gabriel found her outside the glass building that had once felt more like a fortress than a company. She was standing under a drizzle, no umbrella, hair damp, shoulders relaxed. "You did it," he said softly. "No," she replied, her breath misting in the night. We did. Then she turned, her expression almost playful. You and your daughter taught me what my board never could, that silence doesn't have to mean surrender. Weeks passed, and the company shifted from survival to reform. Hana made the once closed corporate floor into a bilingual innovation lab where engineers from Tokyo, Queens, and Seoul worked side by side. Every major report was now translated twice, verified by both languages before approval, a tribute to the day a janitor had corrected the truth. She also created the Kintsugi Fellowship, scholarships for children of factory workers, mechanics, and translators, those who built quietly, like her father. The biggest surprise came 3 months later, at a community event in Queens. The old mechanic's garage where Gabriel worked had been transformed into a makerspace, a collaboration between Sato Dynamics and a local nonprofit. The sign outside read, "The Keiko Center for Repair and Renewal." Inside, children learned to solder circuits and fix bicycles beside veterans, artists, and engineers. On the wall hung a simple motto in English and Japanese, "To repair is to heal." Mia had changed too. Where she once hid behind her father's sleeve, she now sat confidently at the piano in the center of the room, her small fingers pressing hesitant but steady notes. Hana watched from the crowd as the girl's voice, soft, trembling, sang the lullaby that had once echoed through a dark elevator. Neko to asa no ame. The room went still. When the song ended, Mia looked up at Hana, then at her father, and whispered, first in Japanese, then in English, "Arigato. Thank you for seeing us." Gabriel knelt, tears pricking the corners of his eyes, and pulled her close. "I always saw you, sweetheart. Always." When he looked up, Hana was smiling through her own tears. Later, after the crowd thinned, Hana approached him carrying a small box wrapped in gold thread. "A gift," she said. Inside was a porcelain cup, cracked and mended with golden lacquer. "From my mother's collection," she explained. "Kintsugi teaches us that the break is never the end. It's the proof we've lived." She placed it in his hands, and for a moment neither spoke. He looked at her, the woman who had once been a symbol of unreachable power, now standing in a garage surrounded by children and grease-stained workbenches. "You could have any boardroom in the world," he said. "Why here?" Hana smiled. "Because this is where the world starts over." As the sun dipped beyond the rooftops, the light caught on the gold veins of the repaired cup, scattering reflections across the walls. It shimmered like a quiet kind of hope. Months later, the press would write stories about Hana Sato's transformation, from Ice Queen to the quiet reformer. They'd show photos of her next to a little girl with a cat-shaped lunchbox and a single father who fixed engines. But none of the headlines captured what truly mattered, the unseen bond forged in the space between silence and understanding. At the opening of the Keiko Center's first scholarship ceremony, Hana stepped to the podium. Cameras flashed, but her voice was calm, unadorned. "Years ago," she said, "I thought power meant speaking louder than anyone else, but sometimes the truest courage is found in the quiet voices, the ones that translate kindness, not ambition." She looked toward Gabriel and Mia. "To those who listen between languages and love beyond loss, you are the gold in every crack." The audience rose in applause. Gabriel took Mia's hand as she clapped along, eyes bright. He leaned toward Hana and whispered, "Looks like the silence finally found its words." Hana smiled, her gaze soft. "No," she said. "It found its heart." Outside, the city buzzed with life, but inside that humble garage turned classroom, 3 people, once strangers bound by grief and misunderstanding, stood together, whole again. The music box on the shelf began to play its gentle tune, and in the golden light, the world felt beautifully mended. In the end, it wasn't the headlines or the stock price that defined them. It was the quiet moment in that little workshop, where gold filled the cracks and silence finally turned into understanding. A billionaire who learned to listen, a single dad who taught the world that compassion is its own language, and a little girl who reminded them both that healing begins when someone truly sees you. If this story touched something in you, if it made you believe that even broken things can shine again, share it with someone who needs that reminder tonight. Leave us a heart or a thought below and tell us, what's the gold in your cracks?